Professor John Jennings is, one of the most prominent faces in the academia scholar work of Afrofuturism. He's also an illustrator, professor. He uses comics as a medium to discuss social issues and race, and of course, speculative fiction. If you follow him on social media, he's very adamant and supportive of Black creatives as well. So welcome to our book club.
Thank you for having me.
Hey. It is very beautiful. I mean, all of the books I've seen so far from Megascope.
Gonna make me cry. I'm gonna do all this.
All of the books I've seen so far from, your imprint. I'm saying your imprint because it's your brainchild. Have been absolutely just, beautiful. And it also goes for After the Rain is an absolutely visually stunning book, and I can't wait to talk about it. So
thank you so much. I think honestly, I don't necessarily I don't like to brag too much, but I think it's probably like my best coloring job to date, because I did the colors on the book, and I was like, David Brain was the artist on it. But I really had a great time with coloring his work. So thank you for that. That means a great deal. So
well, let's get right into it. So, a Nigerian cop from Chicago goes to visit their family in Nigeria. And there's this haunting storm. Like, okay, my first question to you is, how hard or easy is it to create a horror environment visually?
That's a great question, actually, and it's something that I'm always trying to figure out, because as you know, I do like quite a bit of like horror stories, right? And I'm a big fan of the genre, and it's because my mom is a massive fan of horror and science fiction. She's the one that got me started down this path, down this dark and bloody path. But she was, so basically I've always been concerned about these particular types of stories for a long time, since I was a child and started reading comics at a super early age. So I have a wide spectrum of horror influences. I'm thinking about, but also, I have a probably wide vocabulary of like horror comics, because, for a long time, horror comics were like the prevalent genre, in American comics. Like after the Second World War, they were selling, issues of like, if you've ever heard of Tales from the Crypt, that's based on a comic book from the 1950s, right? So anyway, so to answer your question though, I was like, it's hard to make people feel unsettled with a comic book, because the first thing is like, it's an abstraction of an idea, and so that's one thing, and they have to be really invested in the images, and so you don't have a lot of tricks that you can get. One of which, of course, is the page turn, right? So like when you're designing a comic book story and you actually know you're gonna have a physical copy of it, right? And you want something surprising to happen, you always put it on the page turn, right? So it's like a gotcha. You're like, oh, and I think that not Lauren, that's what I'm thinking about. Thinking about Octavia Butler's story. I think that Chioma loses her hands on a page turn, as I recall. So when you turn the page, like, her hands are gone, and it's like, oh, so that kind of stuff. The other thing is actually to use weird layouts and weird types of color things to make people feel off, as far as like what a comic is supposed to be. Some people are like, yo, is this a comic book, or am I being attacked by the comic book? What's going on with this? And so, comics, I think, in some ways are inherently surreal. That has this kind of like dreamlike quality to them. Case in point, like if we're sitting in a restaurant, we're having this conversation, and a dude in an orange rabbit comes into the room, we're gonna be freaked out, right? But if we're in a cartoon, we'll just say, hey, Frank, why don't you have a seat? You see what I'm saying? Because it's like the strangeness of a cartoon space is very different than reality, right? So you can get away with a lot of stuff. The other thing to remember is that when you're doing a comic book, every aspect of a comic book, every aspect of the page can be activated for storytelling. That includes like the shape of the panel, the typefaces that you use, the colors, the gutter space, which we use quite a bit. The gutter is the space between the panels, right? So yeah, so these are some of the things that we use to kind of like create the atmosphere, as you said, of horror or some type of like unsettling, supernatural, otherworldly experience. Nnedi calls this story African Jujuism, right? Because it's borrowing heavily from, West African folklore and belief structures and things of that nature. So
my question was, how do you convey movement in comics? Because I felt like I was running with Chioma.
That's good. First of all, thank you for that. And I will tell David that you said that. So there's different ways. First of all, of course, the panel is a construction of time, right? So when you're jumping from panel to panel, these are snippets. If you can think about it like you're watching a movie, but you're actually watching like segments of it, that kind of thing. So the movement is happening in your head. You're projecting yourself into the characters. When you're creating a cartoon, you're really trying to create like something that is representative of the character, but also not too descriptive, so that the viewer can imbue themselves into the comic. That's why, for instance, if you look at like, say, Bugs Bunny or like really abstract comics, like, or cartoons, it's almost like the more abstract they are, the more people they represent. You know what I'm saying? So that's one thing as far as like how cartoons work. So there's different ways to show movement. Of course, you go panel by panel. You can actually use motion lines, things of that nature. Another trick that we used a lot was camera angles. So there's a lot of similarity between how film and comics use camera angles, establishing shots, worm's eye view, that kind of stuff, and so a lot of times what we're doing is kind of borrowing from the film aspect. It's like Isis had a question.
Yes. So my question is pretty basic. I'm sure you get it all the time. What drew you to On the Road for adaptation, and what's the comparison to adapting a short story versus adapting a novel? Like, which do you prefer? Do you have a preference?
Both of those are excellent questions, actually. First, I'll start with the second one first. So I found that working, and this is something I just came across. I'm sorry, we just did a book event with, you ever heard of Rain Taxi? They're out of the Midwest, and they're like kind of like a, they do like a lot of book events and stuff out of the Midwest. And the gentleman who was running that was like, I was waiting for somebody to do a short story, right? Because it seems like it would actually fit better, for the medium. And the reason he said that, and I think I agree with it, is that when you're doing a short story, you can actually have a little bit more elbow room, for the art to have a little bit more breadth. You can do different things. Whereas like if you're doing a novel, just so you know, the Kindred book that we did is like 240 some pages. It's not as long as the original novel, right? So you actually have to cut more. You have to like really be economical about what's being said. It's very stressful actually, to try to get everything, because people, this isn't the novel, you know what I'm saying? This is not what I was feeling, And so it's really like a lot more pressure, on the adapters, I think.
I think what's one of the most interesting things about this graphic novel, it is, like you said, it's like a genre bending, story. It's sci-fi, horror, and to some degrees, you would even say it's kind of like a supernatural,
Yes.
like it's like a lot of things into one. And I think genre bending stories are one of the best because you get a little bit of everything into one. So I thought that was pretty cool. How do you prepare yourself to draw something that is a little bit more graphic, like, brains spilling out and stuff like that? Like, what do you look at first? Like, what does your mood board look like when you say, well, I'm going to have to draw someone guts today? So
it's funny because I don't necessarily have like, pictures of guts, but like I said, I grew up watching a lot of horror, saying like my mom was, I probably watched so many inappropriate things when I was coming up. Like I grew up in like, in second run movies, they call them grindhouses. Like we would go and see, matinees of like Edgar Allan Poe movies and like kung fu films. And all kinds of wild stuff that I probably shouldn't have been watching. And so I think that it's always been easy for me to discern the difference between fantasy violence and real violence. Like I actually like pictures of actual death or pictures or of actual violence sickens me. It actually like literally makes me nauseous, you know. But these are cartoons and they're actually like, it's play acting, you know what I'm saying? And so to me, like, I don't necessarily have to prepare that much for it because I just, you know, that they don't mean the same thing. I mean, they're symbolic violences, right? I find like that real life is far more terrifying, you know? And I think that horror gives us like a certain amount of distance to deal with reality, you know? I mean, to a certain degree, horror is always one of the things that it's always preparing us for the end or the beginning, you know, so that kind of thing. You know, it's always about transition, you know? And I think that, you know, it's not as off-putting as it probably, you think it should be. I don't know. I mean, but like it's just something that I had that I've been pretty adept at, you know. Of late though, it's been harder just because I think having a child and also the type of horrible things that have been happening in the world, it's been a little bit difficult to think about these things. And so I've been wanting to do a little bit more lighter stuff, but I've always had like, I've been pretty adept at dealing with very difficult subject matter. You know, it's just been a, you know, a gifting or like or a skill set. I think with the idea of monstrosity, I think you have to first understand what the monster is trying to be. What is it trying to represent? You know, we used the it's almost like the monster itself was all of the things, right? You know what I'm saying? It was all encompassing, right? And it had different manifestations, you know, if you want to call it a monster, but really it's like these ancestral spirits that are trying to speak, right? And sometimes they would manifest themselves as a bunch of lizards. It's almost like, you know, like Dracula. You know, how Dracula can turn into different, like, you could be a wolf, it could be mist, he could be these different things. There's this book called Dracula MFer that just came out.
I like that. I like that comic. It's funny to me though.
It's hilarious, but it's also like this it's like a next wave feminist take on Dracula, but also the way that they did Dracula was Dracula had all these eyes, and it was almost like it was this mystical, like it wasn't Frank Langella or like Christopher Lee or like Gary Oldman coming out of the night. It was like it was the night, you know. And so, you know, the abstraction of it, I think is really important, you know, because what we're looking at is like a system of spirits, you know what I'm saying? And that's something that you see, like the Mumau are like their systems, you know. And so you really do encounter not just one creature, but like a pantheon of creatures, right? And I think that's what's really, really unsettling about this. Like, there's no way that she wins this. You know what I'm saying? You know, there's no winning this. She's gonna have to submit to this force, right? And then at the end, she's glad that she did, right? And so a lot of those things are achieved by color, by line work, by design, but also like, what do you show? Like, one of my favorite things is like when we first show the road monster, you know, it's like you just see its feet and it's like it's coming up out of the sky. Like, but this is directly from her text, by the way. You know, we didn't make that up. I mean, this is straight up. We just tried to illustrate what she told us it was, right? And we just try to use the tools to do it the way that we wanted it that fit, you know. And I love this image of like when you don't even really see all of the monster either. Never really. I mean, you see a little bit, but and sometimes in the distance and sometimes it's obscured. And then the road monster, like this one part where it's kind of looking at the audience, is one of my favorites. But she's super tiny, like she almost like real little. And it's like a Godzilla sized thing. It has this big giant, like, you know, Nigerian mask on. And yeah, it's just, I don't know. We wanted, so I think like we didn't really create one monster. We created a system of monsters. Now I have a question for you. Are like you in a vault with your Funko Pops?
I have way too many, so that's just like some of them.
Lord Jesus.
That is so cool.
Somebody's got issues, right? This is amazing.
There's something like 1,700 of them at this point.
Wow. Wow. That's impressive.
Will B, it looks like your hand is raised.
Yes, it is. Hi.
Hello.
I don't know what ancestor touched you and the people that did this book, but I'm gonna tell you now. I mean, and then your explanation of what you know has given it more depth. So now that wasn't part of what I was thinking about telling you, but let me tell you what I was thinking about telling you. This book scared the bejesus out of me. Okay, I mean, it was, and I am not into horror. So even when the book arrived, I said, well, what were you thinking about? I mean, because it's not, I mean, but that book, I mean, and I understand all of the technical stuff that y'all was talking about and all the changes of colors and things like that. But my mind, my intellect was not obviously engaged in this book. For me, this was really just about something that hit my spirit in such a profound way. First of all, I wouldn't read it past 7 o'clock. All right. Whatever reading that I did of it, I did it before 7. And it was interesting to me to see what my reaction to what was going on. That is such a beautiful, powerful, I'm just at a loss. And I wish I could get a recording of this so that I could really take a look at all the technical and intellectual stuff that y'all was talking about. But this book hit me where I live because it had me asking questions about what are some of the things that I believe. I mean,
it means a lot to me for you to say that.
And I'm an old woman, you know. I you know, this ain't, you know, Southern Baptist woman. You know, I ain't used to read no stuff like this and having it affect me. I'm gonna tell you, I'm so proud of y'all.
Thank you so much.